The year was 2347, and humanity had been traveling among the stars for only 80 years. It was not a long time when compared to the ancient races that ruled the galaxy. But in those 80 years, humans had built colonies on dozens of worlds, and they had learned one important truth. They were not alone. And the universe was not friendly. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the USS Ironclad. He was a tall man with gray eyes and a face that showed the stress of command. The holographic display in front of him flickered with incoming messages, and none of them were good. The Galactic Authority had sent their demands. They wanted humanity to give up all their colonies. They wanted humans to stay on Earth and never leave. They called humanity a primitive species that needed to be controlled. Jake read the message again and felt anger rise in his chest. The Galactic Authority was a group of 12 alien races that had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 100,000 years. They had technology that humans could barely understand. They had ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They had weapons that could destroy planets. And they were afraid of humans. Admiral Lisa Grant's voice came through the communication system from Earth Command. She sounded tired but determined. "They're not going to negotiate, Jake. The Authority has decided that humans are too dangerous to be allowed to spread. They're sending a fleet to Kepler 22b. Kepler 22b was one of humanity's largest colonies. 3 million people lived there, including families with children, scientists, farmers, and workers. They had built cities and farms on a world that had been empty before they arrived. "How many ships?" Jake asked. 300 warships. "They'll arrive in 6 hours. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was working at their stations, but he could see the fear in their eyes. The Ironclad was part of a defense force of only 42 ships. They were outnumbered more than 7-1. Chief Engineer Ben Torres looked up from his console. He was a short man, with dark hair and quick hands. "Commander, I've finished the calculations. Our railguns can fire at 12% of light speed. At that velocity, a tungsten slug carries more energy than a nuclear bomb." Jake nodded. This was humanity's advantage. While the alien races had developed energy weapons and shields over thousands of years, humans had taken a different path. They had perfected the art of throwing things very fast. A railgun was a simple concept. It used electromagnetic force to accelerate a metal slug to incredible speeds. The aliens thought it was primitive. They thought shields designed to stop energy beams would protect them from anything. They were wrong. Lieutenant Derek Cole sat at the weapons station. He was young, barely 25, but he was one of the best gunners in the fleet. "Sir, the Authority fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. I'm counting them now." He paused, and his face went pale. 312 ships, Commander." Jake opened a channel to Captain Katie Sullivan on the USS Sentinel. She was his second in command for this battle. A woman with red hair and a reputation for staying calm under pressure. "Katie, we're implementing Protocol Kinetic. Tell all ships to spread out and prepare for engagement." "Understood, Jake. We'll make them pay for every inch." The Authority fleet moved toward Kepler 22b in a perfect formation. Their ships were beautiful in a way, all smooth curves and glowing lights. The flagship was a Vortani dreadnought, a vessel so large that it made the Ironclad look like a toy. High Commander Keth Voran stood on the bridge of that dreadnought. He was a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. He had conquered 17 star systems in his career. He had never lost a battle. "The humans have formed a defensive line," his sensor officer reported. 42 ships. Their weapons appear to be simple, magnetic accelerators. Keth Voran made a sound that was like laughter. "Magnetic accelerators? How primitive. Our shields will stop their projectiles like rain against a window. All ships, advance and destroy them." The Authority fleet moved forward with confidence. They had fought thousands of battles against hundreds of species. They had never met a race they could not defeat. Jake watched them come. His hands were steady on the command console. The range closed, 1 million kilometers. 500,000. 200,000. Fire. 42 human ships opened fire at the same moment. Railgun batteries launched hundreds of tungsten slugs, each one traveling at 36,000 kilometers per second. At that speed, they crossed the distance to the Authority fleet in less than 6 seconds. The Authority shields were designed to absorb and redirect energy. Lasers, plasma, particle beams, all of these could be stopped, but the shields had no way to stop solid metal traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. The first slug hit the Vortani dreadnought and punched through its shield like it was not there. It entered the ship near the front and exited through the back, leaving a hole the size of a house. The second slug hit the reactor. The dreadnought exploded in a ball of fire that destroyed 3 nearby ships. Kethvorin died without understanding what had happened. His last thought was confusion. The primitives had killed him with rocks. The battle continued for 47 minutes. The Authority ships tried to fight back, but their energy weapons were designed for different ranges and different tactics. Human ships were smaller, faster, and they could fire their railguns every 30 seconds. Lieutenant Cole called out targets with a cold voice. Enemy cruiser. At bearing 275. Firing. Hit, confirmed. Target destroyed. One by one, the Authority ships died. Some tried to retreat, but the human ships pursued them, firing again and again. The tungsten slugs showed no mercy. When it was over, 218 Authority ships had been destroyed. The remaining survivors fled into hyperspace, carrying tales of horror back to their masters. Humanity had lost 11 ships. 342 crew members were dead. It was a tragedy, but it was also a victory unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Back on Earth, in a secret laboratory beneath the Nevada desert, Dr. Natalie Price watched the battle data stream across her screens. She was a small woman with brown hair and eyes that missed nothing. She led Project Doorway, the most secret program in human history. Her assistant, Kyle Bennett, stood beside her. He was young and nervous, but brilliant. "They won," he said. "I can't believe they actually won." Natalie did not smile. "The Authority will be back. They'll bring 1,000 ships next time. Or 2,000. We can't win a war of numbers." She turned to look at the device behind her. It was a ring of metal and crystal, 3 meters wide, connected to cables and computers. Inside the ring, the air shimmered with blue light. "We need to finish the teleportation array," she said. "If we can move ships and weapons instantly across the galaxy, they'll never be able to predict where we'll strike." Kyle nodded. "The math is solid. I think we can have it ready in 6 months." Natalie looked back at the battle data. The Authority had ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years. They had crushed every species that had risen against them, but they had never faced humans before. They had never faced a species that had spent its entire history finding new and better ways to kill. While the aliens had grown soft and confident, humans had refined the art of war. 6 months, Natalie repeated. "We'll give them 6 months, and then we'll show them what humans can really do." The stars waited, cold and silent. The first battle was over. The war was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler, 2-2b. The news of the Authority's defeat had spread across the galaxy like fire. Species that had been ruled for thousands of years whispered about the humans who had destroyed 300 warships with simple metal slugs. The Galactic Authority was not used to losing. They had ruled unchallenged for so long that defeat was something they only read about in ancient history. Now they gathered the largest fleet ever assembled, 2,000 warships from 8 different races, all meeting at Nexus Station. Nexus Station was the heart of the Authority's military power. It was a space fortress so large that it had its own gravity. Millions of soldiers and workers lived there, maintaining the weapons that kept the galaxy in line. High Arbiter Kethvorin II had taken command after his father's death at Kepler 2-2b. He stood before the assembled admirals and spoke with cold hatred in his voice. The humans killed my father with primitive weapons. They think they have won something. They are wrong. We will gather our full strength and burn their worlds to ash. Not one human will survive. Quit, the admirals cheered. 2,000 ships was enough to conquer 100 species. Surely it would be enough to destroy one. But while the Authority made their plans, humanity was not waiting. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a bunker that did not appear on any map, Dr. Natalie Price stood before her greatest creation. The teleportation ring hummed with energy, casting blue light across the concrete walls. It had taken her team 6 months of sleepless nights. But they had done it. General Scott Patterson stood beside her. He was an old soldier with white hair and hard eyes. He had fought in 3 wars before this one, and he had never seen anything like the device before him. "You're telling me this thing can move people instantly from one place to another?" he asked. Natalie nodded. "Not just people, ships, weapons, anything we want. And the best part is that there's no signal, no energy trace. The Authority's sensors won't detect anything. We simply appear." Patterson looked at the ring for a long moment. "Show me." Natalie turned to her assistant Kyle. He pressed a series of buttons, and the ring's glow intensified. The air inside shimmered. And then there was a flash of light. Where there had been empty space, there was now a metal crate. "That crate was on Kepler 22b 30 seconds ago," Natalie said. 12 light-years away. It arrived here instantly." Patterson let out a slow breath. "This changes everything." "Yes, it does. But we need to do something else first. We need to get targeting data from Nexus Station. Our railgun platforms can hit anything in the galaxy if they know exactly where to aim." Patterson frowned. "You want to infiltrate the most heavily defended base in the galaxy?" Natalie smiled for the first time in months. "That's exactly what I want." "Thanks." 3 days later, a team of 12 Marines gathered in the bunker. They were volunteers. Every one of them. They knew the mission was dangerous, but they also knew what was at stake. Sergeant Ryan Cooper led the team. He was 32 years old, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. He had been fighting since he was 18, first on Earth, and then on the colony worlds. He had seen friends die and enemies fall. He had never been afraid of a mission before, but this one was different. Lieutenant Amy Walsh briefed the team one final time. She was their intelligence officer, a tall woman with sharp features and a sharper mind. "You'll teleport directly into Nexus Station, into a maintenance corridor on the lower levels. From there, you'll split into 4 teams. Your objective is to plant quantum beacons throughout the station. These beacons will give our railgun platforms exact targeting coordinates." She brought up a holographic map of the station. It was enormous, a maze of corridors and chambers that would take days to explore. "You have 6 hours, Amy continued. "After that, we pull you out whether you're done or not. If you're captured, we can't rescue you. Do you understand?" Ryan looked at his team. 11 faces looked back at him. All of them determined. "We understand. Let's do this." They stepped through the portal one at a time. Ryan went first, his weapon ready. There was a moment of cold, like diving into ice water, and then he was somewhere else. The maintenance corridor was dark and filled with pipes and cables. The air smelled strange, like metal and something else he could not identify. Alien air. His team appeared behind him, one after another. They formed up in silence, communicating with hand signals. No one spoke. Sound could travel far in these corridors. They split into 4 groups and moved into the station. Ryan took 2 men with him, Private Danny Moore and Corporal Steve Lawson. They were good soldiers. Steady and quiet. The inside of Nexus Station was like nothing Ryan had ever seen. The corridors were too tall and too wide, built for species larger than humans. The walls were covered with symbols in languages he could not read. Alien soldiers passed by in groups, but the humans stayed in the shadows, moving from cover to cover. They planted the first beacon in a power junction. Ryan pressed it against the wall and activated it. The device was small, no bigger than his palm, but it would send targeting data across the galaxy. "One down," Danny whispered. 8 more to go. They moved deeper into the station. The beacons had to be placed in specific locations to give complete coverage. 1 near the shields, 1 near the command center, 1 near the fleet docking bays. At one point, they had to hide while a patrol passed. Ryan pressed himself against the wall and held his breath. The aliens were Vortani, the same species that had led the attack on Kepler 2b. They were tall and blue-skinned, and they carried weapons that glowed with energy. The patrol passed without seeing them. Ryan waited until the footsteps faded, then signaled his team to move. The hardest part was the command center. It was heavily guarded, with checkpoints and security doors. But Ryan had studied the blueprints. He knew there was a ventilation shaft that led to the chamber above. They crawled through the shaft in single file. It was tight and hot, and Ryan could feel sweat running down his face. But they made it. Through a grate, he could see the command center below. Dozens of aliens worked at stations, coordinating the massive fleet that would soon attack Earth. And there, in the center of it all, stood Kethvoran II. Ryan placed the final beacon. This one was the most important. When the attack came, this would be the first target. They crawled back through the shaft and made their way to the extraction point. The other teams were already there, waiting. All 37 beacons had been placed. "Let's go home," Ryan said. The portal opened, and they stepped through. Cold, darkness, and then the familiar lights of the bunker. They were back on Earth. Dr. Natalie Price was waiting for them. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Did you get everything?" Ryan handed her a data chip. "Everything. Targeting coordinates for the whole station. Plus, something extra." He smiled grimly. "Complete technical data on their shield systems." Natalie took the chip like it was made of gold. "This is perfect. We can modify our railgun rounds to pass right through their shields. They won't be able to stop us." "Natalie, we can see the round the stride." General Patterson stepped forward. "How long until we're ready?" 2 weeks, Natalie said. 2 weeks, and then we end this war." Outside the bunker, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere out there, 2,000 Authority warships were preparing to destroy humanity. They thought they were unstoppable. They had no idea what was coming. The Authority fleet came out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 2,000 warships arranged in perfect battle formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. High Arbiter Kethvoran II stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Divine Judgment. He looked at the tactical display and felt satisfaction fill his chest. This time, there would be no mistakes. This time, the humans would die. "Report," he commanded. His sensor officer, a Veltrani female named Cythera, studied her screens with 4 eyes. "The system appears quiet. High Arbiter, I detect civilian traffic near the 4th planet, but no military vessels." Kethvoran frowned. "No military vessels?" "Unknown, High Arbiter. Perhaps they have fled." Admiral Yethkoran, commander of the secondary fleet, spoke through the communication system. "This feels wrong, Arbiter. The humans fought fiercely at Kepler 2b. Why would they abandon their home?" Kethvoran waved away the concern. "They are cowards at heart. They won one battle through luck and trickery, and now they know they cannot face our true strength. All ships, advance to the 3rd planet. We will burn their cities and salt their fields. Let this world serve as a warning to any who would stand against the Authority." The fleet moved forward like a tide of death. Each ship was larger than any human vessel, armed with weapons that could crack continents. The crews were confident. They had conquered countless worlds. What was one more? They did not know that humanity was watching. 47 railgun platforms had been positioned across human space. They were not in the Sol system. They were scattered across 300 light-years, hidden in the darkness between stars. Each platform carried 50 railgun batteries, each battery capable of firing rounds that traveled at 20% of the speed of light. And thanks to the quantum beacons planted by Ryan Cooper's team, they had perfect targeting data. On Earth, General Patterson stood in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. Screens covered every wall, showing the position of the Authority fleet. Dr. Natalie Price stood beside him, her hands steady on the firing console. "The Phantom rounds are loaded," she said. "Modified to phase through their shields. They won't even know we're shooting until the first hits land." Patterson watched the enemy fleet move deeper into the system. Part of him wanted to warn them, to give them one last chance to turn back. But he knew it would be pointless. The Authority had made their choice. They had come to commit genocide. Now, they would pay the price. "All platforms report ready," an officer called out. Patterson took a deep breath. This was the moment that would decide the fate of humanity. If the Phantom rounds worked, they would win. If they failed, Earth would burn. "Fire," he said. Across 300 light-years of space, 47 platforms fired at the same instant. Over 2,000 railgun rounds launched into the void, traveling at speeds that made light seem slow. The rounds were small, just cylinders of tungsten wrapped in a special coating that would let them pass through Authority shields. They covered the vast distance in moments. The Authority never saw them coming. The first round hit a Krith battleship near the front of the formation. It passed through the shield without slowing, punched through the hull, and exited the other side. The ship's reactor lost containment a second later, and the vessel exploded in a ball of white fire. Then the rest of the rounds arrived. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The Authority ships died by the dozens. Rounds tore through shields, hulls, and bodies without stopping. Explosions blossomed across the fleet, like flowers made of fire. Ships that had conquered star systems were reduced to debris in seconds. Kethvoran screamed orders from his bridge as the divine judgment shook under multiple impacts. "Return fire. Find the source of those projectiles." Sithara's hands flew across her console. "I cannot." "Hi, Arbiter. The shots are coming from dozens of locations across human space. The targeting is impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Kethvoran roared. "Find them and destroy them," but there was nothing to find. The railgun platforms were too far away, too small, too hidden, and they kept firing. The second volley arrived 3 minutes after the first. 600 more ships died. The third volley came 2 minutes after that. By then, the Authority fleet had lost all formation. Ships scattered in every direction, trying to escape the invisible death that fell from everywhere at once. Admiral Yethkoran's ship took a direct hit to the command deck. His last words were a prayer to gods he had stopped believing in centuries ago. Kethvoran watched his mighty fleet crumble around him. He had lost over 1,500 ships in less than 12 minutes. The surviving vessels were damaged and scattered, their crews in panic. "Retreat," he ordered, the word bitter on his tongue. The remains of the fleet turned and ran. They activated their hyperspace drives, desperate to escape the nightmare. But humanity had one more surprise waiting. Dr. Natalie Price had spent 6 months perfecting the teleportation system. She had not just learned to move people and ships. She had learned to move something far more dangerous. As the Authority ships prepared to jump to hyperspace, portals opened inside them. Not large portals, just small ones, the size of a fist. But that was enough. Through each portal came a metal sphere wrapped in explosives. The spheres appeared in engine rooms, in ammunition storage, in reactor chambers. They detonated the moment they materialized. 106 more ships died without ever knowing what hit them. The survivors fled into hyperspace, leaving behind a field of debris that stretched for millions of kilometers. The greatest fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scrap metal and frozen bodies. Back on Earth, the command center erupted in cheers. Officers hugged each other. Some wept. They had won. Against all odds, they had won. General Patterson did not celebrate. He stood watching the screens, counting the enemy ships that had escaped. 311 vessels, most of them damaged. It was a victory, but the war was not over. "How soon can we strike Nexus Station?" he asked. Natalie was already running calculations. "We have the targeting data. The beacons are still active. If we load the platforms and coordinate with our fleet, we could be ready in 72 hours. Quote, Patterson nodded. "Do it. We need to finish this before they can recover." In space, the debris field drifted slowly through the Sol system, pieces of alien ships mixed with frozen bodies and shattered weapons. It was a graveyard that stretched from one planet to another. On the few Authority ships that had survived, the crews told each other what they had seen. They spoke of weapons that appeared from nowhere, of shields that offered no protection, of death that fell from the stars themselves. The Galactic Authority had ruled through fear for 100,000 years. Now, for the first time, they were the ones who were afraid. Keth Voron sat alone in his quarters aboard the Divine Judgment. His ship was badly damaged, limping toward Nexus Station at half speed. He had lost over 1,600 ships. He had lost the war, but he would not surrender. He would rebuild. He would find new weapons, new tactics. He would have his revenge. He did not know that humanity was already preparing the final blow. He did not know that his fortress, his soldiers, his entire civilization was about to face a reckoning. The shockwave had just begun. The council chamber of Nexus Station had never seen such chaos. Representatives from all 12-member races of the Galactic Authority screamed at each other across the great circular table. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for new attacks. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to accept what had happened. Keth Voron stood in the center of the chamber. His uniform was torn and stained. His flagship had barely survived the journey back to Nexus Station, and he had not slept in days. Around him, the beings who had once praised his leadership now looked at him with hatred. "You promised us victory," the Krith ambassador shouted. His species had lost 400 ships in the Sol system. "You said the humans were primitives. You said our shields would protect us. Their weapons are unlike anything we have faced." Keth Voron replied. His voice was tired. "They fire solid projectiles at speeds we never thought possible. Our shields are designed for energy weapons. They offer no protection." "Then build new shields," the Helix delegate demanded. She was a tall insectoid creature with compound eyes that glittered with anger. "Adapt. Evolve. That is what we have always done." The Vorani representative raised one of his 4 hands for silence. He was ancient, over 3,000 years old, and he remembered when the Authority was young. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should consider peace." The chamber went quiet. Peace was a word that the Authority rarely used. They conquered. They ruled. They did not make peace with lesser species. "You suggest we surrender?" the Helix delegate asked. "To mammals? To creatures that evolved on a single planet less than 100,000 years ago?" The Vorani shook his head. "I suggest we survive. The humans have demonstrated restraint. They have not attacked our homeworlds. They have not used their teleportation weapons to strike our civilian populations. Perhaps they would accept terms." "Never!" Keth Voron slammed his fist on the table. "I will not bow to the species that killed my father. I will not surrender to primitives." The argument continued for hours. But while the council debated, humanity was not waiting. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ironclad. Around him, 300 human warships waited in formation. Each one had been equipped with a teleportation drive, a device that could transport an entire vessel across the galaxy in an instant. All ships report ready, Lieutenant Derek Cole announced. He had been promoted after the Battle of Kepler 2-2b, and now he served as Jake's executive officer. Jake looked at the stars on the view screen. Somewhere out there, Nexus Station waited. It was the heart of the Authority's power, a fortress that had never been conquered. It was about to fall. "Open a channel to all ships," Jake ordered. Derek pressed the controls. "Channel open, sir. This is Commander Morrison. In a few minutes, we will teleport directly to Nexus Station. We will be outnumbered and outgunned. The enemy will fight hard to defend their home. But we have something they do not have. We have the will to win. We have the determination to protect our families, our worlds, our future. Today, we end this war. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity will not be conquered. All ships, prepare for teleport." The crews of 300 ships made their final preparations. Weapons were charged. Shields were raised. Prayers were whispered. Jake took a deep breath. Execute. The stars vanished, replaced by blue light. There was a moment of cold, of nothingness, and then they were somewhere else. Nexus Station filled the view screen. It was enormous, a wheel of metal and light that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Defense platforms surrounded it, each one armed with enough firepower to destroy a moon. But the human fleet had appeared inside the defensive perimeter. The Authority had never imagined that an enemy could teleport directly to their doorstep. "All ships fire," Jake ordered. 300 human warships opened fire at once. Phantom rounds streaked toward the station, passing through shields and tearing into the hull. Explosions rippled across the surface of Nexus Station. Defense platforms returned fire, but the human ships were already moving, dodging and weaving while their railguns continued to pound the fortress. Inside Nexus Station, alarms screamed through every corridor. Soldiers ran to battle stations. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut as sections of the station lost atmosphere. Kethvaran sprinted from the council chamber toward the command center. Around him, the walls shook with each impact. Lights flickered. Smoke filled the air. "Report!" he shouted as he reached the command center. Sithara was at her station, her four hands flying across the controls. The humans appeared without warning. "High Arbiter. They're inside our defensive grid. Our shields are failing across the station. We're taking heavy damage to sectors 7 through 12. Launch all fighters. Get our ships into battle." "I'm trying, High Arbiter. But the humans are targeting our launch bays. We've lost 60% of our fighter capacity." The station shook again, harder this time. Kethvaran grabbed a console to keep from falling. Outside, the battle raged. The human ships were smaller than the Authority vessels, but they were faster, and their weapons were devastating. The phantom rounds tore through anything they hit, ignoring shields completely. Captain Katie Sullivan commanded the USS Sentinel in the thick of the fighting. Her ship had taken damage, but it was still firing. "Target those defense platforms," she ordered. "Take them out before they can reorganize." The Sentinel's railguns spoke again and again. 2 defense platforms exploded. A third tried to flee, but a volley from the ironclad caught it from behind. Jake watched the battle unfold. The station's defenses were crumbling, but the real objective was not to destroy Nexus Station. It was to capture it. "Deploy the Marines," he ordered. On the lower decks of every human ship, soldiers waited by teleportation pads. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed for close combat. They were ready to fight and die. Sergeant Ryan Cooper led the assault team that would strike the council chamber. He had 100 Marines under his command, all veterans who had survived the worst the galaxy could throw at them. "Remember your training," he told them. "Short bursts. Check your corners. And watch for civilians." The teleportation pads activated. Blue light surrounded the Marines, and then they were gone. They appeared in the corridors of Nexus Station. The air smelled of smoke and fear. Alien soldiers filled the hallways, firing energy weapons that splashed against human armor. Ryan raised his rifle and fired. The first alien fell. Then, the second. His team moved forward, methodical and deadly. The aliens were brave, but they were not prepared for close combat against humans. The Authority had relied on superior technology for so long that they had forgotten how to fight at arm's length. Human soldiers moved through them like wolves through sheep. Ryan led his team toward the council chamber. They encountered resistance at every corridor, but nothing could stop them. The Marines fought with a fury that shocked their enemies. They used guns, grenades, and when necessary, their bare hands. They reached the council chamber in less than an hour. The doors were sealed, guarded by a squad of elite Authority soldiers. Ryan did not hesitate. "Breach charges," he ordered. His team planted explosives on the door and took cover. The charges detonated, blowing the doors inward. The Marines rushed through the smoke, firing at everything that moved. The council chamber was in chaos. Alien representatives tried to flee, only to find human soldiers blocking every exit. The elite guards fought back, but they were quickly overwhelmed. When the smoke cleared, Ryan stood in the center of the chamber. His armor was scorched and dented. His rifle was empty, but he was alive, and the enemy was defeated. The alien representatives gathered together, their faces showing fear and disbelief. Among them was Kethvorin, his uniform covered in dust, his eyes burning with hatred. "The Galactic Authority is finished," Ryan announced. "You have two choices. Surrender unconditionally, or we begin teleporting antimatter into your homeworlds." Kethvorin stepped forward. "You would not dare. You would kill billions of innocent beings." Ryan met his gaze without flinching. "You came to Earth to do the same. The difference is that we have the ability to follow through, and you know it." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, one by one, the council members signaled their surrender. Even Kethvorin, in the end, bowed his head. The war was over. The Galactic Authority had fallen, and humanity had proven that they would never, ever be conquered. 1 year had passed since the fall of Nexus Station. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Galactic Authority existed only in history books now. Its member races had scattered, some returning to their homeworlds in shame, others seeking new alliances in a universe that had suddenly become very different. In its place, humanity had built something new. They called it the Terran Concordat, a government unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was not built on conquest or fear. It was built on cooperation and mutual respect. President Megan Chen stood before the General Assembly of United Worlds. The chamber was vast, filled with representatives from over 100 civilizations. Some wore robes of silk and gold. Others had bodies that looked nothing like humans. But all of them listened. As the president spoke, "Humanity did not start this war," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried clearly to every corner of the room. "We did not ask to become the dominant power in this region of space. We simply wanted to live in peace, to build our colonies, to explore the stars. The Galactic Authority refused to allow that. They called us primitives. They called us an infestation. They tried to destroy us." She paused, looking at the assembled delegates. Among them were species that had been ruled by the Authority for thousands of years. Species that had never known freedom until humanity had broken the chains. "We could have taken revenge," Megan continued. "We had the power to destroy your worlds, to enslave your peoples, to do everything that the Authority had done to you. But that is not who we are. We believe that every species has the right to exist. We believe that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. We believe that the galaxy is big enough for all of us." In the gallery above the chamber, Admiral Lisa Grant watched the proceedings. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes were still sharp. Beside her sat Commander Jake Morrison, who had become a legend throughout the galaxy. "Do you think it will last?" Jake asked quietly. "This peace we've built?" Lisa considered the question for a long moment. "The Authority ruled through force," she said finally. "They kept species in line with threats and violence. We're trying something different. Whether it works depends on whether people believe in it. And if they don't," Lisa smiled grimly, "then we still have the Railguns." In the former Authority territories, humanity had begun sharing its technology. Not the weapons, of course. Those remained closely guarded. But medical advances, agricultural techniques, and clean energy systems flowed outward from Earth to worlds that had been denied such things for generations. On the planet Krith Prime, human doctors worked alongside alien physicians to cure diseases that had killed millions. On Vorani VII, human engineers helped build irrigation systems that would end famines that had lasted for centuries. On dozens of worlds, species that had never known anything but oppression began to hope for something better. Dr. Natalie Price had been appointed director of the Terran Science Council. Her teleportation technology, once a weapon of war, was being adapted for peaceful purposes. Goods and people could now travel instantly between star systems, making trade and communication easier than ever before. She stood in her office overlooking San Francisco Bay, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. Her assistant, Kyle, entered with a tablet full of reports. "The teleportation network is expanding faster than expected," he said. "We've connected 3,000 star systems so far. Trade is up by 400%. Economic growth across the Concordat is unprecedented." Natalie nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. "Any response to the deep space probes?" Kyle hesitated. "Actually, yes. That's why I came. We're detecting signals from beyond the edge of explored space. They're coming from the direction of Andromeda." Natalie turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Artificial signals? Definitely artificial. Someone is out there, Dr. Price. Someone we've never met." Natalie smiled. The galaxy had tried to destroy humanity for daring to be different. Instead, they had become the most powerful civilization in known space. Now, it was time to reach even further. Across the Concordat, life continued. On Earth, children went to school and learned about the war that their parents had fought. On Kepler 22b, the colony that had once been threatened with extinction was now a thriving metropolis. On 100 other worlds, humans and aliens worked together to build a better future. Captain Ryan Cooper had requested a different kind of assignment after the war. He had seen enough violence to last several lifetimes. Now he led humanitarian missions to worlds that had been devastated by centuries of Authority rule. His ship, the Hope's Dawn, orbited a planet called Veltris III. Below, a civilization was struggling to rebuild after their Authority overlords had fled. Ryan stood on the bridge, watching supply shuttles descend through the atmosphere. Lieutenant Amy Walsh stood beside him. She had followed him from the war to the peace, serving as his second-in-command on this new mission. "We've delivered enough food to feed the northern continent for 6 months," she reported. "Medical supplies are being distributed to the major cities. The local government is cooperating fully." Ryan nodded. "Good. There's a refugee camp on the southern continent. 50,000 people who lost their homes when the Authority collapsed. They need everything. I know. They need everything." Ryan looked at the planet below. It was beautiful, from space, all blue oceans and green continents. But on the surface, people were suffering. People who had done nothing wrong except be born under the wrong government. "Set a course," he said. "We've got work to do." The Hope's Dawn turned and began its descent. Behind it, the stars shone cold and eternal, witnesses to a universe that had been forever changed. In her office on Earth, Natalie Price was already preparing a probe to send toward the signals from Andromeda. Somewhere out there, another civilization was waiting to be discovered. Perhaps they would be friends. Perhaps they would be enemies. Either way, humanity would be ready. She thought about the journey that had brought them here. 80 years ago, humans had taken their first steps into space. Naive and hopeful, the universe had tried to crush them, to teach them that the strong always devoured the weak, but humanity had refused to learn that lesson. They had taken the weapons that their enemies mocked as primitive and turned them into instruments of liberation. They had developed technology that the ancient races could not comprehend. They had proven that a young species, barely out of its cradle, could stand against empires that had lasted 100,000 years. And they were just getting started. On Nexus Station, now renamed Unity Station, delegations from across the galaxy gathered for the first anniversary of the Concordat. Former enemies shared meals and stories. Species that had been at war for millennia found common ground in their shared hope for the future. Kethvoran II was there too. He had not been executed or imprisoned. The humans had offered him a choice: spend his life in exile, or help build the new order he had tried to destroy. To his own surprise, he had chosen to help. He stood by a window, watching ships from a dozen species pass by. A human woman approached him, a young officer, with dark hair and kind eyes. "You look thoughtful," she said. Kethvoran turned to face her. "I am thinking about how wrong I was. I believed humans were primitives, animals to be controlled. I believed our technology made us superior. I believed the authority would last forever." The woman smiled. "And now? Now I understand. Technology does not make a species great. It is their spirit, their determination, their refusal to surrender. Humans have something that the authority never did. You believe in something greater than yourselves." The woman nodded. "That's what makes us human." She walked away, leaving Kethvoran alone with his thoughts. Outside the window, the stars stretched to infinity. Somewhere out there, new challenges waited. New enemies, new friends, new wonders to discover. Humanity had proven they would not be conquered. Now they would prove something else. They would show the galaxy that power does not have to mean cruelty. That strength can be used to build, not just to destroy. That the universe, vast and cold and indifferent, could still be a place of hope. The shockwave that had erased the galactic authority was fading now, replaced by something new, something better. And across the stars, humanity continued its journey, reaching ever outward, never looking back. The end.